In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the two seemingly different campaign objectives of brand awareness and lead generation, what they are, how they're different, and which one's going to be best for your business. Let's get to it. Hey there, my name is Adam Erhart, Modern Marketing Strategist, and welcome to the Modern Marketing Show, where we help you grow your business by making way better marketing. So if you're interested in learning the latest and greatest marketing strategies, tools, tips, tricks, and tactics, well, you may want to consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Alright, let's talk marketing objectives. Specifically, two of my absolute favorite campaign objectives, one of which being brand awareness and the other being lead generation. Now here's the thing when it comes to these marketing objectives. You see, most marketers tend to fall squarely in one camp or the other. The brand awareness people, for example, say that lead gen is too salesy and destroys the brand image and reputation. And the lead gen people say that brand awareness ads are useless and don't provide a real and concrete, tangible return on investment that's accountable and trackable. So, which is the better option, and more specifically, which one's going to be right for you? Well, I'm going to tell you exactly what I believe at the end of this video, but first, let's go over some of the key differences between brand awareness campaigns and lead generation campaigns. Alright, so the very first thing we need to cover here is what exactly is brand awareness. You see, when we're going to be running a brand awareness campaign, it's important to kind of understand what exactly our objectives are, what our goals are, what we're seeking to achieve, and probably most importantly, how we're going to measure this. So at the end of the day, we can deem whether the campaign was successful or whether it wasn't. So, in a nutshell, and really in its most basic sense, a brand awareness campaign is really just how well people know your brand. Or to put it literally, how aware people are of your brand. Hence, brand awareness. Not very original, but at least it explains it pretty clearly. Now, the reason brand awareness is important is kind of self-evident, right? After all, if people don't know about you, they don't know about your brand, well, how are they ever going to do business with you? But where brand awareness campaigns tend to fall short is because there's a big gap between someone simply knowing about you and then actually going and doing business with you. All that said, people and consumers, and the customers that we're trying to reach in this case, well, they only have a limited mental inventory for brand names or names in general, which means that you really want your brand and your business to occupy that incredibly valuable real estate in their minds. Now, one of the cliched sayings is essentially you want to become the Coca-Cola of your industry. Now, the reason we use Coca-Cola as an example in this case is just because it's such a well-known brand that people actually ask for it by name. This is the same reason that some brands have become synonymous with the products that they actually are. Good examples here are Kleenex or Band-Aid. Not really products, they're actually the brands behind them. But it's rare that somebody asks for tissue paper or a plaster, or I don't even know what the generic name for a Band-Aid is. Let's say a plaster. Yeah, it just sounds wrong. This is the reason that you really want your brand to be really well known so that it becomes synonymous and interchangeable with whatever product or service or whatever essentially that you're selling to your market. And the reason that they're deployed all the time, and even by some of the more hardcore kind of lead gen advocates, well, they still recognize the importance of this aspect of a brand awareness campaign, and that is that people, customers and prospects, those that you're seeking to essentially sell to, well, they need a lot of touch points in order to build that know, like, and trust factor that's going to be required to do business with you. Now, the number of touch points that are going to be required to build that know, like, and trust factor and in order to kind of create a sale, well, it's going to vary depending on your business and your market and your industry. But depending what statistic you read, it's somewhere between 6 and 12, maybe 13 or 14 if you've got a higher price point thing for sale or if it's sort of a higher trust value industry, things of that nature. Basically, if you're selling a pack of gum, you probably only really need one touch point. But if you're selling something like insurance or a home or business-to-business services, well, you're going to require a lot more touch points. Regardless, this is where brand awareness comes into play, because the more well-known you are and the more touch points that you make, the more trust that you're going to be able to establish with your market. Also, as consumers, we've been kind of subconsciously trained to associate frequency with trust, meaning that if you can show up more times in front of your target market, well, they're naturally more likely to trust you and therefore to do business with you. Now, fortunately, when it comes to touch points, these can happen rapid fire. Sure, of course, we've heard about how we need to nurture relationships and it can take time to build that trust aspect, but for some people, this can happen very fast. Really what you want to do is you want to facilitate the journey so that it's up to your consumer to decide how quickly they want the relationship to progress. As an example here, you could run a brand awareness ad. They could maybe take some kind of action on that ad on the very first try. They might then download a guide or watch a video. They might then then get retargeted with another ad and receive an email and then maybe watch another video. And all of this could happen in the span of maybe even just a few minutes. Others, on the other hand, this could happen over a period of hours, of days, of weeks, of months, and in some cases even years, which is why it's important to continually drip or continually deliver more and more valuable content and brand awareness type materials to your market. Now, a really important note here when it comes to brand awareness is you need to make sure that the content that you're putting in front of your prospects is entertaining or educational or informative in some way, and more specifically, that it's on brand. Because you want to make sure that these touch points that you're making, well, they all line up with your brand. So if you're sending all sorts of different and divergent and confusing messages, none of that brand awareness is going to carry over because you're going to end up confusing and possibly losing potential customers. Alright, so now that we've got that established, let's cover some brand awareness advertising metrics, because at the end of the day, one of the biggest arguments against brand awareness is that it's not really trackable and you can't really tell if it's working or not. So here's some metrics that we like to use in order to judge the effectiveness or at least how many people are getting exposed to our potential message. The very first metric is reach. Reach covers how many different people saw your message. It's a really good indicator of sort of how wide or how broad or how narrow, if that's the method you're choosing to use. Well, it's essentially just a measure of how many different people are getting exposed or have the potential to become more aware of your business. The next metric is frequency, and this is how many times someone saw something. Now, this one's important because, again, as we covered, we do need to increase those touch points. So by keeping an eye on frequency, we're going to be able to tell how many times someone has potentially seen your ad or your content or your message. And the last one is impressions, and this is simply just reach times frequency. So how many different people saw your message how many different times, and that gives you impressions. And this is kind of the main metric that people use when they're looking at brand awareness campaigns. How many different impressions did we get? And if we want to get more granular and look at the budget side, what's our cost per impression? So basically, how much is it going to cost us to get in front of our target market? Alright, so now that we've covered reach and frequency and impressions, well, let's take it a step further and really dial in how we're going to measure brand awareness. Because if you've got an agency or someone on your team and they're advocating just running brand awareness campaigns, but all they're doing is really spending a lot of money and you don't have a lot of sales in return for that, not a great strategy. On the other hand, if you can actually track that, yes, this is working, more people are talking about us, more people are trusting us, they're hearing about us, they're liking us, well, eventually this is going to correlate to more sales, provided you're making good offers and have a good product market fit. All the usual stuff. Alright, so the first one we need to look at is brand recall. This is essentially how well people are going to remember your name. Now, really hard to go out there and survey all of the potential people and say, what's the first brand you think of when it comes to cars or drinks or services or whatever it is. On the other hand, what you can do is simply take a look at your Google Analytics data for your website and see how many people are coming to your website direct. This is a good indicator because it means that somebody has actually put in your name or your brand name in order to get to your website. And how are they going to put it in if they've never heard of you, right? That's why brand recall is one of my favorite ways to look of overall brand awareness campaigns and making sure that this is increasing over time. Another good way to do this is with another Google tool using Google Trends and tracking the mentions, or basically how many times your brand is mentioned on social media or across the web. And again, what we're looking for here is an upward trend in those number of mentions made. Again, clearly indicating that more people are talking about you and therefore more people know about you. This next one's a little more advanced, but it involves search volume. And essentially, if your brand starts becoming a targetable keyword, meaning that people can bid against it on Google Ads or it's showing some kind of search volume on the search engines, well, this is a good sign that, again, more people are searching for you and your brand is actually becoming so valuable that people are willing to bid against it in order to rank above you for your own brand. It sounds frustrating, actually, if someone's willing to bid against your own brand, but it's actually kind of cool because it shows that you've really solidified a position in your consumers' minds. Plus, for what it's worth, it's going to be really hard for someone else to rank against your name. So as long as you do proper optimization and make sure that you're continuing to market your business well, you should be okay. Lastly, we have things like vanity metrics. Now, vanity metrics are easily my least favorite metrics of all. These are things like likes, comments, and shares. Basically things that make you feel good and make you look really good, but don't really relate to more sales or more customers or more leads or more revenue for your business. That said, as a brand awareness thing, they're not too bad, because more likes, more comments, more shares means more engagement, and more engagement typically means that more people know about you and are talking about your business. Alright, so why do the brand awareness camp and the lead generation camp, why don't they get along? And what is it about brand awareness that the lead geners just don't like? Well, for starters, attribution with a brand awareness campaign is a little trickier. After all, it's really hard to figure out where exactly that sale came from, where it originated, and what factors were in place in order to deliver the sale. And if you can't figure out where the sale came from or what's working and what's not, well then how do you know what part of your marketing you should do more of and what part's completely useless and you should just stop doing altogether? The other problem that lead gen has with brand awareness is that brand, well, they do recognize that it is a valuable asset, does take a long time to build, which means that you're going to have to put in potentially a ton of time, a ton of money, and a ton of energy into creating content, running brand awareness campaigns, and all of these things that are going to help to build trust and people being more aware of your business, but don't necessarily equate to short-term sales, which a lot of businesses are governed by. Alright, so now that we've got all that covered, let's dive into lead generation as a campaign objective. Alright, so for starters, what is lead generation, or lead gen as it's more commonly known? Well, essentially, lead gen is just attracting and converting people who have no idea who you are or may not have heard about your business and converting them into prospects and people likely to do business with you. Basically, if brand awareness is generating more awareness for your brand, well, lead generation is generating more leads for your company. Basically, again, the name kind of implies and says exactly what it is. Now, lead gen is typically done by providing something of value to your prospect or potential customer in exchange for their contact information, which allows them to become a lead. Now, the first thing you need to understand when it comes to running an effective lead generation campaign is that nothing happens without a good offer. All the touch points in the world simply don't matter if the touch points that you're making aren't irresistible enough, or they don't incentivize your prospect to take action and hand over their contact details. At the end of the day, whether people buy or not isn't simply because they're aware of you, it's because they like the solution that you're proposing. They like the offer, they like your product or your service or your business. Basically, they like what you can do for them, not just the fact that they know you. We all know somebody that we really like, but we're not exactly going to hire them to do important tasks if we don't feel they're up for the job. Now, just like with a brand awareness campaign, the touch points required and the funnel, as we call it, with lead generation, well, the funnel or the steps that someone walks through, these can happen rapid fire as well. For example, they could see the ad, they could hand over their contact information, they could be retargeted, moving them further down the funnel, and basically move them closer and closer to a sale, and all of this can happen very quickly. Alright, so if lead generation is all about generating leads by essentially providing something of value to your potential customer in exchange for their contact details, well, what are some of the metrics you want to take a look at to make sure you're on the right track? Well, one of the first things you want to look at is CTR, or click-through rate. This is basically showing how many people saw your ad and then clicked on it in order to take action, basically indicating that it was interesting and relevant to them. The next metric is CPC, or cost per click. This basically tells you how much it's going to cost you every single time someone clicks on your ad. The next metric is conversion rate, and what this shows is of the people that clicked, how many people actually went all the way through with the action by handing over their contact details in exchange for whatever you were promising. Finally, we have CPA, or cost per acquisition, and this is probably the most important metric of all when it comes to lead generation because it's the cost that you're going to end up paying in order to acquire a lead. Now, how much you can afford to pay to acquire a lead is going to depend on a number of different factors, but most importantly is going to be the lifetime value of your customer. For example, if you've got a customer that's worth $10 over their entire lifetime, well, you're obviously not going to want to pay more than $10 to acquire a lead, and that's assuming you have a 100% conversion rate by turning that lead into a customer. On the other hand, if you're selling a product or service for $10,000, $20,000, or $50,000, well, paying $10 a lead sounds cheap. You might even be willing to pay $20 or $50 or maybe even $100, depending on how fluid and how greased up your funnel really is at converting them from lead to paying customer. Alright, so how can you measure the effectiveness of a lead generation campaign? Well, fortunately, when it comes to measuring lead gen compared to brand awareness, it's actually really easy. Essentially, all you need to know is, are you acquiring leads for an acceptable cost, meaning that you're profitable, or are you not and you're paying too much, meaning that you're losing money? Being profitable is good, losing money is bad. It's that simple. With lead generation, by tracking things like click-through rates and conversion rates and cost per acquisition, well, all of the data is easily accessible and really easy to read, meaning that making decisions is a lot more strategic and therefore a lot easier to make the right ones for you and your business. Alright, so what is it about lead generation that the brand awareness people just don't like? After all, we've just painted a pretty clear and compelling picture of why lead gen sounds like a pretty good strategy. Well, the biggest problem with lead gen from the brand awareness perspective is that lead gen is really focused on the short term and the short term alone. Where brand awareness is seeking to build a brand and really create an asset around your business, lead generation tends to just be focused on the short win, acquiring leads, getting as many as you can for as cheap as you can, and converting them into customers, with little appreciation for building that longer term and more sustainable brand and business. Okay, so now that you know the key differences between a brand awareness campaign and a lead generation campaign, which one is going to be best for you and your business? Well, the answer there really depends on what type of business you're in and whether you're in a business to business or B2B type industry, or whether you're doing a business to consumer or B2C business, meaning you're selling direct to the consumer. First up, we have the business to consumer or B2C type business. Now, typically brand awareness campaigns are going to be a lot more prevalent in this type of industry because it's going to tend to apply with a more mass market appeal. Basically, the goal here with a B2C and with a brand awareness type approach is to reach as many of your ideal target market as possible with a fun and memorable and on-brand piece of content. Your focus here is going to be less on collecting the names and emails and contact details of your specific customers and more essentially on carving your name and your brand and your business into their minds so that you become the most relevant and the most memorable brand that's going to be associated with your industry. A key thing to remember is that repetition is key here. So you really want to focus on those touch points by ensuring that you're constantly showing up in front of them in as many relevant and strategic ways as possible. And on the flip side of that, while repetition is important, so is novelty. So you want to keep things fun, fresh, and exciting, and make sure that the content you're producing is relevant and memorable, because the only thing worse than showing up a million times is showing up a million times with a completely bland or boring or vanilla message. That's a great way to waste money. Alright, so now let's talk about B2B or business to business, where lead gen tends to be the method of choice. The reason lead generation is the preferred method for business to business markets is that you're dealing with a significantly more limited and more targeted and more narrow focused part of the market. Basically, we're not trying to go for mass market appeal here because it simply wouldn't make sense because we just don't have that many of our targeted buyers out there in the real world. On the other hand, we have a few very carefully selected business to business leads that we want to acquire and bring into our funnel. B2B also typically involves a more relational style marketing approach rather than a transactional style approach. Again, we're not selling a pack of gum here or a t-shirt or anything like that. We're involved in complicated and often long-term and very expensive purchases that are going to be long-term and ongoing relationships. For this reason, it pays to acquire a lead so that you can continue to nurture them again and again and again over time with relevant and valuable and helpful information. Also, brand awareness is much less of a consideration here because again, we don't need everyone to know about us. So we don't necessarily want awareness, we want consideration. And more so, we want conversion. And ideally, you want it fast, which means providing some kind of irresistible offer or valuable content in exchange for your prospects' contact information. So which one is best? Well, inside our marketing agency, we use both brand awareness and lead generation campaigns on a daily basis for both our B2B and our B2C clients. Also, as I just touched on there, if it's a B2B client, we tend to err more on the side of lead generation, and if it's a B2C client, we tend to err more on the side of brand awareness. That said, if I had to pick an absolute winner of which one I prefer, 9 times out of 10, well, it would have to be the lead generation side because I really like trackable, accountable, and measurable marketing campaigns. The reality is, whether you're B2B or B2C, investing your time, energy, and resources in a measurable, trackable, and accountable marketing strategy is going to be well worth it and will provide a significant return on investment. Alright, the next thing you're going to want to do is check out the video I have linked up right here, which is going to be released next week. It's part of this B2B versus B2C series, and it's going to give you even more actionable and practical tips that you can use to immediately deploy in your business. So make sure to check back next week for that video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time on The Modern Marketing Show.